Good morning. Right now, the United States military is quietly moving more than 100 million barrels of commercial oil through the Middle East,
Right.
and they are doing this to stabilize the global economy. But at the exact same time, back in Washington, the administration is initiating sweeping cuts to its own intelligence agencies.
It is a striking contrast, yes.
Welcome to your custom deep dive. Today is mid-June 2026. We are providing your strategic update on current events across the Western Hemisphere. Our mission today is to map out the intersection of foreign policy, transnational crime, and, well, domestic political shifts.
And we have a very complex stack of intelligence estimates to get through today.
We do. But before we dive in, a quick note of thanks to our sponsor, ProWave AI. This briefing is generated by Stylo News, an AI-powered news application.
Which is a fascinating tool, actually.
It really is. Stylo News is the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software. That is the architecture currently used by government, military, and enterprise operations worldwide.
Meaning you, the listener, have the exact same caliber of intelligence mapping that global division makers use to navigate these crises.
Exactly. So let's get into the official title of today's brief. World Cup, Cartels, and Crisis. The Western Hemisphere's strategic update. I want to bring in our expert to help us separate the signal from the noise here.
Good morning. It is great to be here.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We do. We are looking at a series of events today that might seem totally disconnected on the surface. We have a massive global sporting event, diplomatic maneuvers in the Persian Gulf, and really intense electoral tension in South America.
But they are deeply interconnected.
Precisely. And our objective today is to calmly present the facts from our sources, outline the various perspectives without any bias, and just examine the strategic courses of action. No alarmism, just the intelligence.
I love that. So let's start right at the epicenter of North America. The United States is currently navigating this profound structural paradox.
There really is a paradox.
We are co-hosting the 2026 FIFA World Cup alongside Mexico and Canada. The tournament is fully underway. We saw the U.S. team's opening victory over Paraguay, which was huge.
Right, and those massive international matchups like Mexico versus South Korea.
Yeah, exactly. It is this immense projection of cultural and economic power on the world stage. But behind all the logistics and the tourism, there is immediate geopolitical friction.
There is. You have FIFA actively having to defend its decisions regarding visa denials for certain national teams.
Right, and widespread protests over ticket prices.
And, of course, the constant, very complex diplomatic negotiations required just to handle Iran's participation in the tournament.
And all of that international cultural projection is happening at the exact same time as some of the most intense domestic polarization we've seen.
Well, the U.S. is gearing up for its 250th independence anniversary next month.
Right.
But the events really highlight those internal divisions. For example, you have a massive UFC fight scheduled right on the White House South Lawn.
To celebrate President Donald Trump's 80th birthday.
Exactly. It's a highly visible display of nationalism and administration support. But concurrently, you have nationwide No Kings rallies organized to oppose his policies.
And we are seeing very specific targeted protests at ICE detention centers, right? Like the ones out in Hagerstown, Maryland.
Yes, and that polarization is unfortunately tipping into alleged kinetic action. In Texas, a suspected Antifa cell was just indicted on terrorism charges related to a physical attack on an ICE facility.
Wow. So while all this public unrest is happening, the administration is executing a pretty radical remodeling of the government apparatus.
They are. President Trump is pushing through comprehensive cuts to U.S. intelligence services.
And he appointed Bill Polt as the interim coordinator, right?
He did, and that appointment is generating significant debate across the sources.
Because he doesn't have a formal intelligence background.
Right. Now, proponents argue this is a very necessary pragmatic disruption. They want to streamline operations and remove entrenched partisan bias from the bureaucracy.
Okay, and the critics?
Critics and veteran intel officials warn that putting someone without formal intelligence experience in charge, well, it removes vital institutional expertise during a highly volatile global period. Social media sentiment is fiercely divided on this.
I want to paint a picture for the listener here. Imagine you're throwing the biggest, most complicated block party in the neighborhood, the World Cup and the 250th anniversary.
Right.
But while you're hosting this party, you are simultaneously down in the basement trying to completely remodel the foundation of the house.
That is a very apt analogy.
So let me ask you, let's unpack this. How do foreign adversaries view a nation that is projecting all this cultural power but exhibiting such deep structural internal fractures?
Well, historically, adversaries view internal polarization as a major tactical vulnerability.
Sure.
Now, current intelligence assessments confirm there is no imminent threat of a conventional kinetic military strike against the U.S. homeland.
Okay, that's good, but what is the threat?
The primary concern shifts to hybrid warfare. State actors, like Russia, they observe this domestic unrest. They see the economic anxieties and the partisan divides.
And they exploit it.
Exactly. They deploy cyber intrusions and disinformation campaigns designed specifically to widen those existing societal fault lines rather than, engaging in direct confrontation.
Okay, so that structural shift inward naturally brings us to the global chessboard, because the administration's domestic policy changes are immediately altering how we project power abroad.
They are, and the Middle East is the prime example right now.
Right. We have this revelation that the U.S. armed forces have been secretly executing this massive naval operation in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, they have actively assisted over 200 commercial vessels in exporting more than 100 million barrels of oil.
Which is just a staggering logistical feat. And the direct market result is that global oil prices have basically stabilized at around $90 per barrel.
Right. The mechanism at play is a direct countermeasure against Iranian attempts to disrupt those maritime supply chains.
So we are underwriting global economic stability.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
By providing a secure corridor for that immense volume of oil.
But here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. I have to push back on these apparent contradictions.
Okay, let's hear it.
We are cutting intelligence at home. We are deliberately reducing our military aviation and naval assets supporting NATO in Europe.
Which is raising serious deterrence concerns, especially with Russia conducting drone attacks in Romania right now.
Exactly. Yet at the exact same time, we pull off this massive, highly coordinated, secret naval deployment in the Persian Gulf to keep the oil flowing.
It is a stark contrast.
Is this a strategic retreat from the world stage, or is it just a radical reallocation of resources?
The intelligence suggests it represents a profound pivot toward a highly transactional grand strategy.
Transactional in what way?
The administration is prioritizing immediate, tangible economic security, meaning keeping global oil at $90 a barrel to prevent domestic inflation.
Ah, so it all ties back to the domestic economy.
Right. They are prioritizing that over the maintenance of traditional, long-standing alliance structures like NATO. It is a fundamental recalculation of foreign policy return on investment.
And we are seeing that exact same transactional approach applied to Iran directly.
Yes, the situation with Iran is evolving rapidly.
Right, because President Trump unexpectedly canceled planned strikes on Iran and announced a near agreement to end hostilities.
Which is a massive diplomatic shift. But the complexities of that near agreement are significant. For one, Israel was reportedly kept entirely out of the loop regarding these negotiations.
Wow. Which obviously strains that historic alliance.
Heavily. Furthermore, the leadership in Tehran is publicly denying that any final deal is actually in place. So it is a very high-stakes maneuver.
And we see this economy-first approach domestically too, right? With the environmental policies.
Yes. The administration recently reversed protections on 3 Pacific Marine national monuments explicitly to allow commercial fishing.
Which drew sharp condemnation from Greenpeace USA.
It did. But it highlights the consistency of the underlying logic. Whether it's securing oil choke points or opening protected waters, the priority is immediate economic output.
Right. Resource extraction over long-term geopolitical alliances or environmental continuity.
Exactly.
Let's pivot from the Middle East and head back to our own hemisphere. Because just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, the diplomatic temperature is rising very rapidly.
You were talking about Cuba.
Yes. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently visited the naval base at Guantanamo Bay.
And he delivered a very stern public warning to the Cuban government.
Right. He warned them against acquiring weapons capable of threatening the U.S. homeland. And the rhetoric he used heavily implied the potential for regime change if the U.S. feels provoked.
And they're backing up that military rhetoric with severe economic mechanisms.
Right. The sanctions on Cuba's state oil company, Cupid?
Yes. They are essentially instituting a fuel embargo to pressure the communist regime. The Trump administration's perspective is that this maximum pressure campaign is necessary to combat state corruption.
To force them to dismantle their political repression apparatus.
Exactly. But obviously the Cuban government views this through a completely different lens.
Right. President Miguel Diaz-Canel has condemned the sanctions. He's calling it an act of economic warfare and a direct violation of their sovereignty.
And the social media sentiment is highly polarized here. You have supporters praising the U.S. for taking a definitive stance.
But on the other side,
Cuban-aligned voices and several international observers argue this is just a hypocritical pretext designed to justify future military intervention.
and the UN Human Rights Office is getting involved too.
They are expressing grave concern over the humanitarian fallout. When you restrict fuel to an island nation, you systematically degrade the power grid.
And hospital operations, food transportation, the collateral damage to civilians is profound.
It really is.
So let me pose a critical question here, just for the listener's perspective. If we look at Secretary Hegseth's warning, are we witnessing the groundwork for a modern-day Cuban Missile Crisis scenario? Or is this primarily a strategy of economic strangulation designed to just collapse the regime from within?
Well, the strategy relies on economic strangulation, but the risk is exactly what you pointed out.
Yeah.
If you isolate the power grid to the point of total collapse, you create a geopolitical vacuum.
Right, and you invite a major adversary like Russia or China to step in and play the savior right on our border.
Precisely. To counter that, the U.S. is employing this dual approach. Economic sanctions to hollow out the infrastructure, coupled with a highly visible military deterrent like Hegseth at Gitmo to warn foreign powers to stay out.
It's a very delicate balance, which actually brings us to a fascinating geopolitical irony in this region.
Oh, the coordination in South America.
Yes, we just talked about the U.S. using economic strangulation to threaten regime change in Cuba, but further south, the U.S. is actively coordinating with Venezuela.
Which is another heavily sanctioned nation.
Exactly. They are cooperating with historically hostile governments to combat a mutual enemy, transnational criminal networks.
It really shows that when it comes to organized crime, pragmatism sometimes simply overrides ideology.
So let's talk about that operation. It was a massive intelligence breakthrough targeting Hector Rusiford Guerrero Flores.
Alias Niño Guerrero. He was the leader of the notorious Tren de Aragua gang.
Right. And taking him down required a coordinated operation involving the U.S., Venezuela, and crucial intelligence from the Peruvian National Police.
Specifically, General Victor Rovredo of Durincri in Peru. It was a highly complex operation.
But despite that victory, the broader intelligence estimates show that cartels are still wreaking absolute havoc.
They are, and they are evolving their tactics constantly. In Colombia's Catatumbo region, for instance, armed groups are now utilizing drone-enabled warfare.
Wow. To control narcotics corridors.
Yes, they are dropping explosives and conducting surveillance to protect coca cultivation areas. It completely changes the strategic reality on the ground.
We aren't talking about groups hiding in the jungle anymore. They are operating in the airspace.
Exactly. It's asymmetric warfare that severely limits the Colombian military's capacity to project authority.
And we are seeing that state authority erode in Ecuador as well.
Yes, the cartel pressure on the state in Ecuador is immense right now.
Specifically in the coastal city of Manta, we are seeing targeted assassinations of justice officials.
And the arson of more than 30 commercial boats. Manta is a vital logistics node, and the cartels are using psychological and economic terrorism to push the government to the brink.
And the intelligence notes make a very specific point about this. While there is no imminent kinetic attack on the U.S. homeland by a foreign state.
Right, as we mentioned earlier.
The spillover from these Latin American criminal networks, the fentanyl, the human smuggling that remains the most immediate disruption concern for North American security.
Precisely. And criminal networks thrive wherever political stability fractures, which seamlessly transitions us to the acute political crises currently gripping South America.
Right, because you can't effectively combat drone warfare in Colombia or secure ports in Ecuador if the central governments are paralyzed.
Exactly. And Peru is holding its breath over a nail-biter of a presidential runoff election right now.
It is incredibly tight. You have the right-wing candidate, Keiko Fujimori, who is campaigning heavily on law and order.
Which resonates deeply with a population terrified by gang violence.
Right. And on the other side, left-wing candidate Roberto Sanchez, who is focusing on severe economic inequality.
And with 98.2% of the ballots counted, the margin is under 1,000 votes.
Under 1,000 votes. That is incredibly fragile.
Both sides are alleging irregularities. A legitimacy crisis there freezes foreign investment and deepens the exact power vacuum cartels rely on.
And meanwhile, despite Venezuela's cooperation on the Tren de Aragua takedown, their human rights situation remains dire.
It does. Cooperation on security does not equate to domestic reform.
Right. There is a global campaign right now led by the Venezuelan diaspora.
Yes. They are heavily pressuring the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the CIDH, to conduct an on-site visit.
To investigate the conditions of over 500 political prisoners who are reportedly facing arbitrary detention and torture.
It places immense diplomatic pressure on Caracas.
So, synthesizing all this for you, the listener, if you are watching the markets or planning international operations, this is the perfect storm.
It really is.
You have a deeply polarized election in Peru that could shift the entire economic policy of the region, sitting right next to cartel violence in Ecuador and human rights crises in Venezuela.
All while the U.S. is radically reallocating its own domestic intelligence and foreign policy apparatus.
Exactly. So what are the primary patterns and upcoming events that our listeners should be watching for?
Three main things. First, keep an eye on the resolution of Peru's razor-thin election. That perceived legitimacy will dictate regional stability.
Okay, number 2.
Watch for the organizational fallout within Trinidad. After the death of Nino Guerrero, you often see these syndicates splinter into hyper-violent, smaller factions.
Right, fighting for territory.
Exactly. And third, watch whether the U.S.-Iran peace negotiations actually hold up under international scrutiny, especially regarding Israel's exclusion.
Because whether it is the price of oil holding at $90 a barrel, the security of supply chains through the border, or political stability affecting global markets, these seemingly disparate events are directly shaping the world you interact with every day.
The geopolitical reality dictates the economic reality. Always.
Before we wrap up, there is a fascinating cultural footnote from the sources that we want to leave you with.
Yes, this is something to mull over regarding the World Cup.
Right. Years ago, the Bosnian band Dubioza Collective originally wrote a song titled, "I Am From Bosnia, Take Me to America."
And it was written as a harsh, cynical critique of the American dream.
Exactly. Yet in this bizarre twist of cultural reappropriation, it has been organically adopted as a massive unifying anthem for the 2026 World Cup hosted here.
It proves that while governments draw hard lines and impose sanctions, culture really has a mind of its own.
It absolutely does. Well, that brings us to the end of today's brief. To navigate this matrix of global events, you really need to be utilizing Stylo News.
It provides the analytical clarity you need.
It does. Stylo News is a mobile and computer app. You can download it and customize it to generate your own personal intelligence-style briefs. It pulls data from hundreds of traditional news sources and X.
It's an incredibly powerful way to monitor these specific trajectories we discussed today.
Subscribe to Stylo News to get AI-powered news on demand at www.stylonews.com at Cornet. We want to thank you so much for listening.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Please reach out and request topics for future deep dives. And be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms. Have a great day.